and we are live. This is the Black Powder Podcast, the only real libertarian podcast on this planet, in this universe, in the cosmos. I am one of your grand hosts, Marcus Matthews, the only real libertarian who has ever existed, and I have a pedigree to prove that. And today, as usual, I am joined by my two super fragilistic, expialidocious hosts. And my good friend, one of my best friends ever. This guy is so awesome. Tub, how you doing this fine evening?
Dude, you're going too far. You're too far. Listen, I am stellar. You know, this is becoming the highlight of my week. You know, just spending this time. Oh, wait.
Other than church.
Yeah. Look, I couldn't even finish that sentence. Listen, it's good to see y'all. And now I will tell you this before we even get started. So my wife is heading out to LA Sunday.
Nice.
And initially I was going to see about going with her.
You should have.
Then you made it clear that if I ever went out there, you didn't want to see me. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to worry about going. And if Marcus doesn't want to see me, I don't want to go.
That's a load of malarkey, pal. A load of malarkey.
Hey, watch your mouth, young man. Listen, this is a family show, all right?
Yeah. And then,
for
now, yeah. And then we have our other distinguished co-host or host, because I don't like the whole co-host moniker and title. I don't believe in that. I believe that we're all equal under the sun, under God's love. So we're all hosts here.
That sounds like a bunch of DEI Marxist malarkey to me.
Malarkey. And with that being said, welcome in Eric Parker, Bold Liberty. How you doing there, pal?
I'm doing good, brother.
All right.
How are you, man?
Brother.
I am actually quite well. Now, today we have a very interesting episode as we have an actual intellectual on, and being the only other intellectual, I couldn't hold that nice guy persona.
Yeah, because I'm going to tank this episode horribly, so be ready, all right?
Being the only intellectual on this podcast, it is my honor to have somebody on that's actually an intellectual, and I can actually have a we've had great guests on, don't get me wrong, but the intellectualism in the hosting department, it's somewhat lacking sometimes, but that's through no fault of their own. This is America, public education. It is what it is. But we have a very distinguished guest on tonight. Eric, you want to give a little background about this guy?
Yeah, so Germinal G is an award-winning author. He's a libertarian. I found him a few years ago, just saw he had published some books on economics. I think there's one, and I was looking at it as like the economic plans of Thomas Jefferson or something like that. And I was like, a few years ago, I was interested in the ideological origins of the founding fathers. So that might have been how I found him. But either way, he's published several books. Two of them, I think, recently won awards for like independent authors. But go ahead and if you want to go ahead and bring him in, we'll let him talk about himself, introduce himself. Hey, Germinal, how's it going?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I hope I did okay with your introduction, but for those that don't know, you're a award-winning author. What are the titles of the two most recent award-winning books? Or is that the two you have that have won independent awards? What are those?
So in 2021, my book titled The Economic Condition of Black America in the 20th Century won the Best Indie Book Awards, and in history. And it was also the finalist for the Excellence Award as well in 2022. And then my book on the biography of Thomas Sowell won the Best Indie Book Award again in biography this time in 2024.
Gotcha. Awesome. So a book on Thomas Sowell and a book on the economic condition of Black America in the 20th century, correct?
Yeah.
And it's because of that start right there where I'm just going to sit here and shut up the whole rest of the show. Because we've already covered, I'm too stupid to be in this conversation. Buck, it's not because of you. I'll make this abundantly clear. I'm too stupid to be
I'm
here
over here.
all right?
I'm over here
Mark,
praising Black Jesus.
The rest of us.
No.
But
I want to ask.
I'm going to chill back here. But all right, I know I'm already stepping on Eric's segment, but Germinal, do us a favor real quick, because this is what we're talking about beforehand. Tell us about your background and your upbringing.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I was born and raised in Ivory Coast, and I lived in Kenya, Nairobi for 4 years. That's where I learned English for the very first time. French is my first language. And after graduating high school, I moved straight in the US. I came with my dad. He pretty much dropped me off, and then he was like, "You're on your own." And I pursued my bachelor's degree at Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., where I studied political science. And then I did my master's in political management from George Washington University as well. My initial goal when I came was to get my education and then go back. I wanted to run for office there. Like at 18, I wanted to be president. But the reality shift, and what made me reconsider my decision to go back home and run for office was the mindset. So I'm a very individualistic guy when it comes to do things, and I strongly believe in private property. And back in not just Ivory Coast, but in African culture in general, we have more like a collectivist mindset, and I genuinely hate it. I don't believe that I have to share anything just because the culture. If I share it because I want to, not because I have to. And I knew that I was going to butt head with people there. So I decided I felt like I was more entrenched into American culture at that point, based on how I think already. Like I felt more Western than purely African. So I thought that it was just better to stay here and make a life here. So so that's how I end up staying. I want to go to law school, so I took the LSAT 3 times. I got into 2 law school, but I end up not going, and even COVID stepped in, so I was like, oh, perfect. Like I don't have to take any loans, and that's when so I was working as a data analyst for a bit, and then I decided to start my publishing company in 2022. But before that, I published my first book in 2018. At first, my books were more political, and then I got into economics when I got accustomed to Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams, and so all the libertarian economists. And then I got into technical economics afterwards, when I started specializing myself in mathematical economics and econometrics as well. So yeah.
So how would you consider yourself, an economist or more political?
I would consider myself an economist, but unfortunately, we live in a society where people use the PhD as a gatekeeping tool, right? So as far as I know, there are no laws saying that you have to have a PhD to be an economist. I know you need to take the bar exam, graduate law school, and take the bar exam to be a lawyer. You got to go to med school and take the exams to become a medical doctor. But there's nothing like that saying for economics. But economics professors, it's all about ego. They will say that, oh no, you're not an economist because you don't have a PhD. So, but I've engaged myself in the work of economic analysis, specifically technical economics. So yes, I consider myself an economist.
See, okay, so I said from the beginning, Eric still has your segment. I'm sorry, dude. But I said
no, this is good. Keep going.
And I'm thinking, okay, once again, maybe he's not so smart, because don't you know, you don't have to have any of that stuff. You just have to get on Twitter and say stuff. You don't have to have any education or know what you're talking about. You can just get on there and say things. So once again, you've used education. You didn't even need it. You could have just been like the rest of us. Just get on there and say random things, and it doesn't make any difference how true it is.
Yeah, and that's exactly what our good friend D said about Tub right now, about his making half of libertarian Twitter so angry this week.
It's been a rough week.
Tub's been making both halves of libertarian Twitter angry this week.
I am in my tiny little portion of it. I'm just stirring things up a little bit.
So Marcus, I don't know if you have any questions for Germinal. I was just going to ask.
Yeah, I did have one.
Go ahead.
you mentioned libertarian economists, and so I'm not. This is an insult, but you came here as a teenager, so you weren't ingrained in the American political system from a lot of these kids are from that a lot of American kids are from birth. Why did you choose out of all the of the two main options
The other two
that we have here in America, one more than North Korea? Why did you choose the third option?
Well, quick correction. First, I came here, I was 20, so I wasn't.
Oh,
Yeah, see, he wasn't a child. He was 20.
But no, at first I used to be a Republican, and but that was because I was like, as I said, I was more political. Back then, I was more into political science than anything else. But then when I started to learn economics, it was a no-brainer. Like,
yeah,
libertarianism is the most economic-leaning political philosophy. When you discuss with any libertarian, they know the economics. Democrats and Republicans, not really. The Republicans will tell you, "Oh yeah, we just need to lower taxes and limit government, and that's it." Republicans never go into they never go in depth when it comes to economic policy. And Democrats, they just want government to do more. They just want government to spend more. And it's libertarians who actually understand demand economics, supply side economics. What are the effects when you implement one law? What outcome is going to generate, and so on and so forth. Libertarians, they understand the economic philosophy of each economic thinking. When it comes to classical economics, Austrian economics, Marxian economics, neoclassical economics, and so on and so, and Keynesian economics, so on and so forth. Like, libertarians discuss those ideas all the time. So it makes sense to become a libertarian once I started reading about pure economics, because economics fundamentally deals with decentralization, and that because the correct economics is free market. You cannot say that you understand economics and then you suddenly support Keynesian or Marxian economics. It doesn't make sense. Economics starts with the decentralization of decision making, and when you understand that, you can only be in favor of the free market. To me, it doesn't make sense that why people support government in the first place.
Now, we would all suggest and probably agree that there's never really been a good free market. There's always been some form of government involvement. So you being way smarter than me, so what do you find to be the biggest intrusion from government into the economy?
Well, when it comes to intrusion, I would say pretty much in every industry, whether it's banking, whether it's oil, even pharmaceutical, like the health industry. I think government is pretty much involved in every aspect. Education. The biggest, I would say, honestly, is pretty much education, because because when you look at the way the cost of higher education increased when Lyndon Johnson decided to be moralistic. He says that, everyone deserves an education, but it's not everyone that want to go to college. Some people are good at other things than pursuing a regular college degree. So, they say that, people have been denied opportunity. Sure, but the part that really gets under my skin is when people use morality for economic policy. They don't understand that no matter how moral you try to appear, you cannot omit market forces. They're there. When people say education is a right, housing is a right, healthcare is a right, I'm like, okay, if something is a right, you don't pay for it in the first place. Mm-hmm. Right? You don't pay for a right. It's freely given to you. I was discussing with someone a few days ago about that, and that person was saying, oh yeah, like healthcare is a fundamental. I say it's not. I was like, okay, and that person is originally from Europe. And I said, okay, but in Europe, right? Sure, you go to the hospital, to the doctor, you don't pay anything up front, right? But when you get your paycheck at the end of the month, That it's a pretty
You're
fat.
paying for it.
Yeah, you're paying for it through your taxes. So it's not a right. Like if it's a right, you don't pay for it in any way, shape, or form.
Because you understand how people are. They hear free and they think it's free. And they don't put the thoughts behind, oh, just because government's providing it doesn't mean it's free. For some reason, people never make that connection of, wait a minute, how does government get money? They never think about that. Government doesn't make money. Government prints money at best. Okay. And they never make that connection there.
And I even think it's even the fact that because they don't have to pay upfront. So the minute that they don't have to pay upfront, they completely forget that you have to pay through your taxes. And it's even worse because it lowers the value of your paycheck, right? Like I always say, your gross income should be equal to your net income. The income tax should not exist because people say, well, how are we going to build roads? First of all, the income tax that the government collects is not even to build the roads; it's to pay the interest on the national debt. So that's at least if they actually try to build the roads, I can understand, but they don't even use that to build the roads.
I mean, people also, when they try to make that argument, they forget about sales tax. Sales tax is also, like, I'm actually, to be honest with you, maybe I'm the libertarian that's crazy. Like, I'm not necessarily against a consumption style tax. I purchase something, taxes are, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that either. Like, that's fine. But the income tax, like, that's the one that I'm strongly against because if I'm exchanging my time and effort and resources and my labor for compensation, I ought to retain the full value of what I'm producing. Like, what the hell? Why are you taking money away from my check?
So it's funny because just before this, we were at the dinner. We were with a couple, and she's a retired teacher. I'm going to put all her business out there. I don't even care. And so she's a retired teacher. And I've been talking about a lot lately because I have a grandson now that y'all see my grandson. Not you. Don't shake
No,
hands
not
with
me,
You've
but
never seen my grandson. But inside of that. So he's 3. And so I'm like, okay, well, at 5, he's going to be starting real school time, basically. And so I've been really trying to push the idea of like a school co-op, like that type of thing where, you get 4 or 5 different kids together, the parents bring in a teacher and they pay that teacher directly without going through all of the stuff. And it was so funny because I'm explaining this to her. She's kind of like, well, okay. And then I said, well, listen, here's about, roughly what a pay would look like each week. And she, and in her mind, because she retired from a government school. So in her mind, she's thinking, oh, okay, wait a minute. And I'm like, well, hang on. I said, if we did this is straight money. There is no income tax or anything on this one. And then all of a sudden it becomes intriguing, because now you start saying, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to get my check and I'm going to keep all of my check. That starts getting attention. Right. I want y'all to see how that happened right there. And so it's funny that when you start telling people that, they get intrigued, but then they go right back to their same old thinking. They go right back to, but this is how we got to do the things, and they fall for all of it. And so somebody in your position, that must just drive you bat crap crazy sometimes.
Oh yeah, it does. Like it's because it's simple, but people have been conditioned for decades to believe otherwise, that even when you present a solution to them and it makes sense, they still can believe it, that it's that simple. They're like, no. There's something. No, they're like, where's the catch? No, there's no catch, man. That's what it is. Just just go along with it.
So what's the big difference then when it comes to that type of thing? Because you said if you stayed over in Africa, you realize, no, dude, I'm not going to be able to do this. Okay, so what is so different that they're doing? Now here's the thing is, I ask you this because maybe we can look at it and go, well, we don't believe in that. You have the freedom, but technically a lot of that's happening here anyway. So what is the big difference of when you said, hey, I can't do that because I think you said private property rights was the main thing. Okay, so explain that out for me, please. What's the difference?
Yes, so where I grew up in Ivory Coast has a capitalist system, but the culture is not fundamentally individualistic like it has been, in Europe and in the United States. It wasn't like at the time of the Enlightenment era, right? Because that was the major catalysis of human flourishing in Europe. When during the Enlightenment era, they were able to understand how you place the individual at the center of not just decision making, but at the center of everything. So in order for society to flourish, you have to let people pursue what they do best.
Mm-hmm.
In African culture, it's not the case. We put the group above the individual. We say that whatever you do is for the group. But the group is nothing else but an aggregation of individuals. When in a group people make decisions, it is never a group that made the decision. It's always the most dominant figure in the group that imposes will on others. And others are too coward to stand up to him. And the person who actually stands up is the one that get blamed or he get reprimanded for standing up. It has always been like this. And that is, in my opinion, the Achilles heel of Black civilization. We always put the group above the individual. When you put the group above the individual, the members of the group, now they see that, okay, they're like one or two productive guys within the group. We're all gonna stuck to him or to her, and they're the one gonna do all the work. But in Western culture, they say, no, every person is his own man. And that's why you see a big difference between the Western world and third world countries.
I'm sorry, but I would argue that we do have that here,
Right.
and here in America. And another country that stands out is Russia. I don't know where you put Russia in the European or Asian category, but we are led by an individual that Americans have put above themselves in a fashion, whereas they think he's going to be the, you know, what I heard from this last election cycle was everybody saying, I have more money under Trump. So they think Trump is going to put more money in their pockets. In Russia, they think nobody's going to keep them safe from Western interests but Putin. And so Putin took it upon himself to make it so he's leader for life. And there's an African term because there was a lot of dictators in Africa that made themselves leaders for life.
No, I agree. I was going to finish my point and say that the difference you see between Western civilization and, let's say, African or even Asian or Latin American civilization is that when you have a society that puts the individual above the group, it produces a lot of inequalities. But in African, Asian, and Latin American culture, when you put a group above the individual, it produces a lot of poverty. So the thing, and it's interesting because here we love to talk about inequality. For God's sake, inequality doesn't mean poverty. I wrote a book about this specifically. That book is not even 200 pages. It's perhaps one of the most technical books I've ever written, but I'm really proud of it because I explain the difference. Inequality doesn't mean poverty. When we're unequal, it simply means that people basically make decisions they allocate the resources according to their preferences, their values, and their choices. So we can be in the same industries, we can both be business owners, we're still not going to get the same outcome. If I reinvest the profits, all the profit I generate from my business, I reinvest that in the business, my net worth is going to grow. If you use the profit of your business to go clubbing, well, you're going to stay poor. Like, what is the big deal? That's number one. And number two, we don't get rich at the same time. That's what inequality is. If I'm making 500K and you're making 300K, we're both rich. We're just not rich at the same time because we make decisions differently. But that's the thing that they don't show here. And to conclude my point about inequality, because the media, they love to talk about like how, you know, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. But the government is responsible for that. Only the government can print money. When you print money, it creates the Cantillon effect. It's not rocket science. The rich, they make sure they tie their money to their investments. That's why I always tell people, in this economy, in this credit-based system, you have no choice but to own assets. Buy stocks, buy real estate, get some equity in some local businesses in your neighborhood. Do what you can to have some money tied to your investments, because the Federal Reserve is going to keep printing money because the government said we have to create X program, we have to create Y program. They're going to print money, and if you leave all your money in your savings, you're going to get poorer. So yes, we're going to have inequality. but the inequality is not created by corporate greed. It is not created by capitalism. It's created by government. Or the inequality that capitalism creates, it's good inequality because, as I said, we all allocate our resources according to the way we make decisions. So we cannot have the same outcome.
So, okay, yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Well, I was just gonna. You mentioned, what was the title of the Inequality Does Not Equal Poverty? Is that the name of the book you wrote?
It's called Poverty, Inequality, and Economic Policy.
Okay. Yeah. So where can we find your books? Are they available for purchase on a website? Maybe somebody can comment your website and we can put up on the screen. And how many, you said your first one was published through a different company. How many of them were published in your publishing company, and how many of them were published elsewhere?
So I wrote my first book in 2018, and I self-published it. And since then, I was just writing, and I have 29 books. Hold
on. When you say if I say I have 29 books, I mean I own 29 books. So when you say you have 29 books, you wrote 29 books?
Yes.
Dude, I'm gonna leave this show now. Like, I'm done. I got nothing left here. Like,
you're adding great color commentary here.
I mean, if you're taking your age into account, that's almost one book a year for your life, because you keep the right book.
The first year.
I hate this guy.
I think there was one year I published like 4 or 5 books, because to me, like, and that's why I love this country. I saw the opportunity. Like, I'm a man, like, I smell opportunities everywhere. At first, like, because, at first when you want to publish a book, before Amazon create the Kindle publishing program, you have to go to a publisher. So it was tough. But then I saw that they basically democratized the platform for any person who wants to write a book someday to do so. So I said, I'm going to take advantage of that. And I've been doing that ever since. And then I learned how to edit. I learned how to become a publisher, how to edit, how to format, how to do all this stuff. And then I saw the opportunity here. I said, I'm going to start my own publishing company. I'm going to compete with those guys. I don't care. Like, there are no laws saying that I'm not allowed to. Like, and I can arguably say that I'm perhaps the only person from Ivory Coast owning a publishing company that focuses on intellectual work. I haven't seen anyone doing what I'm doing. So yeah, I saw the opportunity. Like, as I said, I'm going to go for it. Like, to me, like, this country offers so much opportunity. It's hard for me not to jump in it.
Go ahead, Tub.
Okay, and so let me tell you, like, you say that, and I get more aggravated, not just at you, but I get more aggravated because here's the thing, you know what? And we'll talk about specifically in the Black community. And the Black community, young Black men will go like, I can't do nothing, I can't make it. And they have all these excuses about why they can't accomplish something, and they'll blame everything else. And yet here you are. And yet here you are saying, well, no, hang on, I saw an opportunity and I took advantage of it. And you said because this country provides that. And I think we need a lot more voices. And I'm still going to call you young, okay? So we need some of these voices in the young Black community, for just to kind of remind them that, no, you know what? You don't have to be a rapper or an athlete in order to accomplish something inside of this country, especially as a young. Now, listen, I say this because these guys know my youngest son looks way more like you than he does me. Okay. And some people are like, what is this guy thinking? But no, but that's what has to happen. So I love that you came on here alone. And not only are you laying out the fact that you're basically laying out that I've wasted most of my life. Okay. So inside of that, but you're saying, hey, listen, because this country has hope. Like, this country provides opportunities that so often we'd rather dismiss. In fact, you know what? So you did mention that you're a libertarian. Remember, because I was like, oh, he's an actual libertarian. And libertarians spend all of our time complaining about everything. Yep. And so, you know what? It just seems odd. Or you know what? It's not odd. It's comforting. It's a nice change to hear even a libertarian come in and say, you know what? Yeah, do we have problems in this country? Of course we do. But, and I think that the change is that is because, you know why? You weren't raised here. I think you had the opportunity that you live somewhere else. And because Americans don't go anywhere. You know, they stay here and this is all they know. In fact, some of them don't leave their city. Some of them don't leave their state.
Oh, no, that's very true. You're absolutely correct. No, it's absolutely true. And that was the mentality I had. I was like, this country is vast, right? There's so many opportunities. Especially what makes the United States unique is risk capital. You have venture capital firms. They literally exist to give you money to create something, right? Like you create a business plan. I always tell this, like, if you have an idea in your head, like create a business plan, talk to some family and friends. That's how I started my publishing company. I had $200. I said, you know what? I'm going to take those $200. I filed for the LLC and I built the website myself. Then I wrote the business plan, and then I talked to my mom, to two of my friends, and I say, guys, like I'm starting the publishing company. And I was able to raise $10,000, and that's how I started.
And it can be done. Like it can be done.
Yeah,
you know the problem is, you worked. You worked and you put the hustle in. And many times
I disagree with you, Tub. You know what the problem is?
I think you work, Germinal. I think you work. Good job, brother. Listen, I don't care what the black man's about to say. I think you work.
No, I'm going to tell you what the problem is.
Marcus,
the problem is government.
Oh, yeah.
And it's 100% government getting in the way. And that's why I've said this, you know, dozens of times. I think Black people are naturally libertarians because we know government is the problem. And the first problem with government is government education. And when you look at the inner city schools, they fail a overwhelming majority of the students they teach in a grand way. But one thing I don't like about that narrative about, you know, Black Americans not understanding this is the land of opportunity is because they never have seen that opportunity under their circumstances, and they've never learned about that opportunity because they're being taught George Washington chopped down the cherry tree, and this is the greatest country on earth, when they're going home and eating a bologna sandwich because, you know, one reason or another, their economic situation isn't where it would be if the government wasn't in the way. That's the number one problem, I think, in the Black community is the fact that the government herders them into these schools, indoctrinates them with, you know, you do this, this, and this will be your outcome. And when they don't reach that outcome,
you are correct, and I actually want to extrapolate on what you're saying here. In fact, I believe, to even complete what you're saying, is that the true difference between the rich and the poor, like what makes inequality in a country like the US, is information.
Yes.
Especially in this day and age. Today, like maybe 3 or 4 decades ago, we didn't have all access to information the way we do today.
Mm-hmm.
But in this day and age, we all have access to information. And everything depends on what you do with the information you have at your disposal. I'm a man I'm obsessed with information. My mom used to call me the FBI because I always collect information. I'm obsessed with data, collecting information, always learning things. But the information I'm getting is not just to consume it, it's to act on it. The people who actually build a fortune in this country, they act on the information they have.
Right.
And I love using the Jeff Bezos example. I watch his movie, I watch his documentary. He's personally my favorite entrepreneur. Yes, he's flawed, I agree. But the way he brought Amazon to life is fascinating to me. This guy was working at D.E. Shaw. He wasn't doing well for himself. At 31 years old, he was vice president. And he stumbled on the information that he can generate more than 2,300% return with the internet. He had 2 choices. First, he sees as like, oh, okay, that's cool. Close his computer and move on with his day. The second choice is, how can I make it happen? We all know what happened today. I don't have to go through, but we all know who Jeff Bezos is. We know what he realized. But that's what I'm trying to say, is that it's always think outside the box. I agree with Marcus when he says that government indoctrinate kids. It's true, because at the end of the day, when they limit your scope, there's not much you can do.
Yeah.
But it's also important for people to have critical thinking. Because we are human beings. We have a brain. Our brain is our greatest asset. It's important for us to think outside the box, to think that there are other possibilities other than what we've been told. Of course, like, it's difficult because there's some areas, if you don't know more than what you've heard, you're stuck. I can even take, for example, like many African countries. When you look at in Africa, for example, like if you're in the capital city and then you go to an African village, it's like two different countries, literally two different countries. And the people in the village there, they don't know any better. They have no idea that, because those people in the village, when you take them in the city, they're like flabbergasted. They're like, oh my God, it's like a new world. Like it's endless to them, and they can't believe it. But in the United States, especially today, it's much more difficult to make excuses for the Black community with the access of information we have, the way internet is flowing around the country. In African countries, a lot of people don't have internet. If you're not living in the city, you're pretty much screwed. You don't have internet like that. So you don't have access to information. Today, we have access to information. We don't even rely on the mainstream media. We're all doing podcasts today. That's why Joe Rogan is the most listened person on earth, literally, because of the internet. So when you consume information from the internet, it's important to stay focused. It's important to use the information you are acquiring and execute on it. Unless you execute on the information you have, you can consume, and then you go to bed, and then you're going to complain that there's inequality. You're going to complain that white people are the one putting Black people down, and so on and so forth. White people don't give a shit. That's the honest
Well, I care.
Well, let me. So I work in IT, and I often use this analogy, and this is more about Americans than it is particularly about the Black community. Americans are getting a shit ton of information thrown at them.
Absolutely.
The problem is Americans don't have the latest CPU chip installed in them, and they have difficult times processing that information. And then our culture, and I'm talking about American culture, is consumerism, glitz, glamour, and celebrity.
Oh yeah.
That's our culture. And when we don't have the processing power to decipher all the crap tons of information that we're getting, because it isn't a Black thing, a white thing. It is a information age, a technology thing. And that's why I think it's so dangerous that these tech oligarchs are so ingrained in our current government. You know, nothing good can become of this, because we as Americans, and more so we as citizens of this globe, do not have the capability and critical thinking skills, because that is one thing that you mentioned earlier that is definitely not taught in any public school in America, is critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
You're taught to, from day one you go in kindergarten, you're taught to line up, you're taught to sit in your seat, hands on your lap. If you have a question, raise your hand, and your question better be, what's 2 + 2? The question better not be, why do we need to go through this process to reach this destination? And that is for me, that's the main thing that afflicts not only the Black community, but the Black community more so, because our education system sucks. I'm gonna finish on this one point.
Sure.
There was a class action lawsuit here in the Los Angeles area. I think it was back in the 80s or 90s. Whereas the schools in South LA and East LA had leaky roofs, they had books without covers, they had water fountains that didn't work, they had desks that were wobbly. But if you went to a more affluent neighborhood, they had all the amenities their kids needed to progress in life. Now, what we have is every school gets inspected, not every school, but random schools in every school district get inspected once a year to make sure that equitable educational factors are present in every single school in the state of California. And now, if we're going to disregard the historical significance and the generational failures that attributed to poor people, I'm not even going to say black, white, or whatever, it's poor people, then we can't truly complain about the affliction of these communities until we actually look at the historical factors that led to that. And the main thing of getting them to uplift their communities is getting government out of the way.
Yeah.
But
Hey,
I think that we get lazy when we just say it's government's fault. You know what I'm saying? I think that there's a lot of things because here's the thing is government's there. But if you decide to take some initiative, you can get around it. Like, you know, a little while back, not too long ago, they actually asked a bunch of kids, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you understand how that used to always be as a doctor, lawyer, policeman, firefighter, all those type of things. And you know what the number one thing is now that they want to be? It's a social media influencer.
Yeah.
That's what they want to be.
And that's us, guys.
It's not a matter. Yeah, it would be us. So it's not a matter of lack of information. It's the fact that they get the information, they don't do with it. Like, so we just make bad use of good information.
Yeah. And you know, that's the processor part I was talking about. We cannot process all this information. Right. You see people that they're coming here with money, flashing all their money, and you're looking at your situation, you're going to want that. And that's what's constantly bombarded upon these communities is that flashiness, because people want to get away from that seriousness of life in general. Well, and that can be lazy, and that could just be plain stupid.
I've recently decided that I'm actually going to give up the church. I'm not going to pastor anymore, and I'm going to go be a rapper. Yeah, I'm going to be a rapper.
Good luck. I thought you were being serious.
Like, oh, that's much better. They're making way more money than I am.
I will already tell you suck at rapping. I actually have music on SoundCloud from my rapping days back in the day. I have
made an assumption based off of something I cannot control. I cannot control my skin.
I've known you long enough to say that with extreme confidence.
Marcus, listen here, poor man's Easy E. I don't want to get into this with you right now, okay?
Most people call me poor man's Emu Ice Cube, or you know, after I hurt their feelings or whatever.
Can I ask Germinal a question, please?
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
Can I please maybe talk to the reason that we're doing this tonight? So, Germinal, let me ask a question real quick to go back a little bit. So you're talking about the difference between West Africa and the States. And you said a big part of it was private property rights. Why? What do you mean? What's the big difference?
Well, it's not the fact that people back home don't have access. Is the mentality, is the culture around private property. That's the main difference. Here in the United States.
Hold on. What do you mean? What do you mean they don't understand private property? What do you mean?
Germinal, do you mean like there's a big Marxist influence in the Ivory Coast or West Africa, or socialist influence? Is that it, or is it something different?
Or they just don't care about private. Like they're just happy with everybody owning it, basically.
Yeah. So it's more like back home we believe that if you own something, you have to share it with everyone else. We call it the culture of the village. In the village, and even Julius Nyerere, the former president of Tanzania, he applied that. Like, we call that village socialism, and of course it didn't work out. But he applied that mindset in Tanzania, and it's and in the village, all the resources are shared. It's pretty much communism, but we don't say like that. But that's what it is. Everything is shared. That's why we say, like, even if you own something, right? Even if you have the legal title to own something, the tradition, the culture compels you to share what you have. But the problem is, in order to increase the value of your private property, you need to be selfish first. And then once you increase that value, now you can sort of redistribute. And in the United States, that's what people understood. That's why in the United States, what people do, they create a company, which is a private property. They do whatever they have to do to boost the value, to increase its worth and everything. Then they get super wealthy, and then once they get wealthy, either through either through selling the company or making to the stock market, what do? They do philanthropy. It's the way of giving back. It's like, okay,
yeah.
I made it, now I can give back. But back home, we don't give you the time to give back because we don't give you the time to build up,
to grow it,
the value of the property so that you can start giving back. The minute you start working on it, everyone is on you saying that, oh, we want our fair share.
Yes.
I don't even know what fair share they're talking about, but they said they want the cut.
And that's almost,
so I'm sorry, real quick. So is that tradition and culture based on survival or rejection of colonialism and in the enterprise where the French said, "This is mine. You guys have no access to this particular area," or is it one of what do you think?
I would say both. So I would say both, because even before colonialism, African culture has always been what we call the culture of sharing. And we attribute colonialism with capitalism, although I don't think the two are linked. And that's what many Pan-Africanists in Africa, they hate colonialism. I understand why, and that's fair. But they associate capitalism, they associate colonialism or imperialism with capitalism. And you guys know Lenin wrote a book talking about how imperialism is the last stage of capitalism and stuff like that. I was like, this doesn't make sense at all. Like, colonialism is pretty much mercantilism. People go colonize because they have limited resources in their own land. It's colonial. So imperialism is in fact mercantilism. And Adam Smith wrote a book, 1,000 pages, called The Wealth of Nation, criticizing mercantilism, how it is ineffective. He said that the wealth of a nation is not based on the quantity of gold that it has. It is based on the productive capacity of its people. The goods and services that we're producing is what creates the wealth of a nation. It's not the amount of commodities we have. And people don't understand that in Africa. And in fact, the reason why Africa is poor is not even because of colonialism. It's true colonialism played a role in it. I'm not going to deny that. But people love to use colonialism as an excuse to justify. It is poor because of what we call rentier economics. So rentier economics is based on 3 factors. Number one, we rely on an external resource. So a commodity. It could be oil, it could be gas, it could be cocoa, it could be coffee, whatever. That's number one. Number two, we do not rely on the productive capacity of our people. So the wealth of the country is based on that external resource that we never created. And number three, and more important, the primary beneficiary of that system is the government. That's why the government, if you guys perhaps pay attention to, in Africa, we never transform our raw materials, we never transform our raw resources into consumable products. And
I would just go ahead, my brother.
Yeah, I'm going to finish and then you can interject. So when you don't transform your raw materials into finished products, when you bargain now with the nations that actually have the industrial capacity to transform them, they eat you out. They literally take a large part of the profit, and the tiny part of the profit goes to the government. And most African countries, they don't redistribute that part of the government, right? So, for example, we love to talk about Gaddafi, like, especially Africans, they love talking about Gaddafi was a good leader, how like his policies helped Libyans. Gaddafi didn't create oil. He relied on rentier economics. Even when we look at Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsula, they all rely on oil. But the difference between them and most African countries is that they use the money, they redistribute that money by creating programs that sort of help, at least. And that's what Gaddafi sort of did. That's what Hugo Chavez tried to do in Venezuela, but of course, he mismanaged the whole thing with Maduro eventually. But that's where the issue is. Unless we give people the ability to create value, to let people pursue what they do best and to create value, we will never have like a strong domestic productive capacity to actually create wealth. And we'll continue to rely on these commodities that we never created in the first place. Right. Marcus, go ahead.
So That he said, Marcus, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead,
yeah.
Mark.
I think he missaid Tub for Marcus. We look like you just got the name mixed up.
I would say Africa is not poor because no European came to Africa because it was poor. They came there because it was rich in resources. Number two is I think I had this dude named Lumumba from a Louisiana gun club on my podcast when I first started, and he was named after Patrice.
Yeah, Patrice Lumumba.
Yeah, and when we were talking about it, and I was saying, when you go to France, what language do they speak? They speak French, right? You go to Spain, they speak Spanish, England, English. When you go to Nigeria, what language do they speak?
English.
But there is almost 200 different languages spoken in Nigeria. And so for me, when I analyze, because I was, I don't want to say a Pan-African, but, I was like, I'm wearing a Public Enemy shirt, and we had this whole get to back to your roots movement back in the 90s where it was conscious rap and stuff like that. I think that's what made me a libertarian. But I don't see the continent of Africa having a natural progression like the continent of Europe did. Europe went through 1,500 plus years of war to decide their boundaries, their culture, and what they were going to be. Africa never went through that natural progression as to deciding what it was naturally going to be. And during the Industrial Revolution, where you're talking about transforming raw products into finished product, they were under severe economic restraint under the colonial system that didn't allow them to develop that. And when they did, a lot of people don't know, most African countries gained their independence in the 60s and 70s. This is I will praise it as being the future of economics, because if you look at emerging economies, Africa as a whole is the #1 continent in the world as far as becoming a emerging economies. It's going to be the first wireless continent because as technology progresses, we're not going to have that old infrastructure like we have right now in the United States with the wire on telephone poles hanging all over the damn place. I think that Black Americans need to look past the past, most certainly. Africa needs to look past the past, most certainly. But what we can't do as Americans of all stripes and Africans of all stripes is discount where we've come from, because you need to know where you came from to know where you're going. And that's what one thing I only time I feel sorry for myself is I can't tell you the Black Americans are the only people on this entire earth that cannot tell you what culture, what their past was, because
You're from Alabama.
Yeah, that's it.
What more you need to know? You're from Alabama.
Well, Rosenthal, you say I'm German. Parker, that's Anglo-Saxon. Matthews is Welsh. I'm pretty sure I'm not Welsh. From
you do have some characteristics.
Well, you're a little you're a little light skinned, brother.
Yeah, I'm tired. But this is why this episode has been so intriguing to me, because we've touched on.
Whoa! Don't close this yet. I got a question.
We're not even done because I haven't got to my economics.
That sounds like a closing.
I was gonna say, Germinal, how much time do you got? Because I think we got a lot of questions. Yeah, Germinal, how much time you got? Because we got a lot of questions.
I have all the time in the world. Let's go.
Okay.
All right.
I wanted to.
No, you just went on a 9-minute rant.
It was
my turn.
All right, my bad.
I've been sitting here. So, Germinal, I see looking at your books and kind of getting back to Africa, because this is interesting. You wrote a book called Classical Liberalism in Africa, and you also got the economic development of West Africa in the 21st century. Let's talk first about Classical Liberalism in Africa, a manifesto. Is this like, what year did you write that? Let me go back and look. It says 2020. Was this like a dream you had thought up, or I remember you said you had thought about going back to West Africa, running for president. I'm guessing Ivory Coast is the nation you'd be running for president in. Is there any following of classical liberalism or libertarianism in West Africa, anywhere really? And if there isn't, have you heard of Javier Milei in Argentina? And do you think that I don't know if you know, but he helped like libertarianism get popular before he kind of ran for president? But he was also an economist. So is there a path forward for West Africa like there is in Argentina right now?
It sounds like he's saying, don't be lazy, Germinal. That's what I hear out of that.
Yeah, let's go.
Do something with your life, would you?
So the thing with libertarianism in Africa is that the thing to understand that libertarianism, it's an attitude, it's a behavior. And when I wrote classical liberalism in Africa, the main thing that Africans in general don't get about classical liberalism, they believe that it's a byproduct of Western culture. And that's why I disagree. It's not a byproduct, it's human nature. Classical liberalism simply means put yourself first. That's it. Put the individual before anything else. And because classical liberalism focuses on what? Limiting government in economic affairs, right? We want government to play a small role. We just want government for security matters, pretty much, and to protect our rights. Other than that, we believe that if people want to pursue whatever they want to pursue, they're free to do so. And classical liberalism also believes in political rights. You know, people have the right to vote, they have the right to assemble, they have the right to create the political parties, to criticize the government and stuff like that. And then classical liberalism also talks about civil liberties. So all these are part of what makes humans flourishing. But then when you actually talk about this, especially if you study in the West, they say, oh, those Western people, they brainwash you. Oh, they didn't brainwash me. It makes sense. To them, like, that's what I'm saying. People have been conditioned to a point where, like, if you really want to implement like ideas like libertarianism or even classical liberalism, you pretty much have to be a dictator for 3 decades, because you cannot do that in one term. It's impossible, because like the work that has to be done is so deep. Like there's nothing more difficult than literally changing the mind of people, because it's ingraining them, and it's ingraining them. It's difficult. And that's why I've always had issues with Africans and even with Black Americans here in America. Like when I talk about my stuff, they say, oh, you're sellouts. And, oh, yeah, there we go again. What else? Like, who have I sold to anyways? But that's the thing, like, because people are so ingrained, it's really challenging. And I love the fact that Milei is president, because he's showing the way that it is possible. And with his chainsaws, like, this guy is the freaking man. Like Milei is, he brought, like, he's been president for what, 2 years now, and in 2 years, he's the first to show that libertarianism actually works. And that will bring me to the fact that, because I also have beef with libertarians, with libertarians to some extent, and the reason why I've been saying this, the reason why libertarians don't move forward is because we are too focused on our factions. If you want to implement your views, your ideas, you need power. There's no way around it. But if you don't fight for power, you're here saying, I'm an ANCAP, I'm this, you're not a pure libertarian. I'm like, you guys are fools. Like, you don't get it. You have democratic socialists. They make sure that they have, like, people getting elected as district attorneys. Like, they really controlling the laws in the local areas. And us, we're here fighting about who's an ANCAP and who's not. And then when you go to libertarian conventions, sorry for my language, but it's a shit show. That's why at some point for a while I took a step back from the Libertarian Party, because of all of that. Because, like, guys, if you really want to change the world, if you want to change your community, your society, you need political power. Milei said that even on Lex Friedman podcast, and some libertarians gave him crap for it, like, oh, Milei says he's libertarian, but he has political power. But how do you think he's going to implement libertarian ideas if he doesn't have power to do so. You can have all the best intentions you want. You need the power to enforce it. If you don't have the power to implement what you want to implement, whatever you believe in is worthless because it's all in your head. And that's where I've been having my beef with libertarians. As like, you guys need to stop being theoretical, be practical. Look at opportunities and go for it. Maybe it's my entrepreneurial mindset talking, but that's how I've always seen it.
I'm going to fight that urge to jump on what you're saying there and talk about how jacked up the party is. Everything in me is going to fight the urge to join there with you and talk about how we keep messing this up. So here's what I wanted to ask you real quick. So you say that I'm a free for your sake. I want to keep calling it back home, West Africa. So back home. So you mentioned about how they kind of take everything. They kind of all come together. So is it culture or is it government? Like, does the culture naturally do it, or is government kind of say, no, this is how?
No, it's a culture. It's a culture. Yeah, okay. That's the reason why I realized that I could not do politics there because of the culture. It's not like, we have this individualistic culture and the government was the one stepping it. No. It's the culture itself. It's like even like in every African family, for example, when there is one kid that is more successful than everyone else, everybody cling to him or to her. My mom, for example, she was the most successful in the family. Everybody cling to her. My dad, same thing. So I'm speaking from what I've seen. That's a problem. Instead of each individual believing that, okay, you're successful, show me how you do it so I can do it myself. They forget how they can do it themselves. They cling on to you, and now they want you to give them money to basically to assist them for everything else. That's even why we don't have a welfare state back home, and thank God we don't have one.
You kind of answered part of my next question right there, because remember in the pre-show we were talking about your parents, and you said your dad was an attorney, he's a lawyer, and so I was thinking, okay, so how is your dad doing in that kind of environment? Like, because he's trying to clearly build himself up. Do you think, and you kind of answer this all together, do you think that if he was here in the States, he'd do even better because he wouldn't have that culture?
Absolutely. Even like, because my dad used to work as a prosecutor for the United Nations for 18 years for the Rwanda genocide. And the court was in Tanzania, where they prosecute all the war leaders of the Rwanda genocide. So because of that, my dad used to not go home back in Africa, because if he went, people were asking for money. They will, they will never leave him alone. So he deliberately stayed in Tanzania so that he doesn't have to deal with that, because people would call like, hey, like we need this, hey, we need that, can you send us some money? It doesn't end. So it's a cultural thing, and that's where the issue is. And that's what I realized. And I was like, the way I think is far too different than the way people back home think.
But that's almost what Marcus was saying, and I think he was even saying it inside the Black community, that if one does well, all of a sudden all his friends are there, and they're like, "Oh, hey, you owe us, or you got to bring it back into the community again." There's so much of get it back into the community. Like, hey, why don't you let me get mine while I can, and we'll see what we can do for y'all later.
Right.
So let me ask you this real quick. So how often do you go back to West Africa, and if you do go back, do they treat you a certain way?
The last time I went back was 10 years ago.
Okay.
So it's been a while. And the last time I was there personally, I never behaved in a way to show people that I live in the US. A lot of Africans who live outside or like in the diaspora, when they go back home, they love showing that they live in the Western world. So they come, they party, they even take like the girls from the local guys there. It creates a lot of frustration. It's true. You see the guy, like, he's been trying to get with this girl and he's been like spending money on her. And then this dude comes from France. Suddenly he sees her, you're cute, come with me. And she leaves the guy for him. Like it's those things. It's personally back, I never did it. Like the way I dress, like people don't even know I live in the US. Like I never tell people, because if you do, it creates frustrations. It creates frustrations. Like my mom even used to tell me like, hey, like you need to limit your interaction with your friends, because just from the fact that you live in the US, people think that, you're suddenly like super wealthy, life is easy for you. They will try to poison you and stuff like that. There were many cases where like people who lived in the West, they went home for vacation and they never went back because their friends killed them out of jealousy and stuff like that. Yeah, it's real. It's that deep. Yeah.
Well, okay, no wonder why you stay in Chicago. Somehow Chicago is safer all of a sudden. All right, so my last question for you, and then I'm gonna be here. But so you have a clear understanding of the political process here.
Sure.
You're smart enough. You have an understanding of economics, obviously. Have you ever considered running for office?
That's a good question. I had considered it, and the problem is I don't know if I want to go under the whole scrutiny thing, like digging into your personal life. And the minute you say like they're gonna dig for something you did 15 years ago, the girls you flirted with, they're gonna come and say, "Oh, you raped me," all this stuff. Like, no, I don't. It's true. Like that's what.
Oh, you made it dark really quick. Like, oh,
I mean, I was like that.
How I raped her. Whoa, settle down there.
It's
that
true.
Me Too movement.
No, it's true. Like those things will come out, and I thought about it, and I did a cost analysis in my head, right? Like a cost benefit analysis in my head. I'm like, okay, you're gonna run for office. How much you're gonna get out? How much you're gonna gain out of it compared to if you stay in the private sector and you gain more financial power?
So, what I want to say this real quick, and truly, I'm done. Then I mean it this time.
You said that 3 times.
Here's what I'm not talking to you, Marcus. I'm talking to Germinal. All right, stay focused. Your little top corner up there. All right. So I will tell you this. This is more of an observation. So when I asked you that question about would you consider running, you perked up and you smiled a little bit.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I noticed that. I noticed that you have not ruled that out. I'm going to say, like, I'm going on the record now. You can talk whatever trash you want to real quick, but I'm telling you, clearly inside of you somewhere, there is still that desire, but you're still 12 years old, so you have plenty of time. So I'm going to harass you in the next few years, like, dude, and when you're running, we're going to find a way to bring you back on again. You're like, I'm too big for you guys now. I'm like, no, come back on so I can be like, I told you it's going to happen. So I'm now checking out. I'm now done.
You're definitely not wrong. It's true that it's something I still keep in the back of my mind, and I'm still weighing all the options, and it's something I haven't like completely decided on, but yeah, it is in the back of my mind. I mean, I love politics. Like, I believe I was built for this. I always knew that if I run for office, I'm not going to lose. I'm going to get elected. I was convinced about it.
Are you going to run as a libertarian when you do, or no? I said I was done, but I lied.
So,
shocker.
I do want to. So let us assume that I decide to run for office.
What
now, is
first
it
off, Germinal? Would it be local, Congress, governor, mayor? What? Let's pick one.
Okay, so let's start from the fact that I say, okay, guys, I'm running. First, I would definitely go local. I would rather go local, and if I go local, it's better to run as a libertarian. Now, when it comes to maybe state or federal, that's where I may consider Republican because of the two-party system. It is easier the way Ron Paul did, because that's how Ron Paul was able to get a lot done. Because otherwise, as a libertarian, it was going to be much more difficult. A lot of people are still not accustomed to the Libertarian Party. They still think that all libertarians are just a bunch of guys that don't want to pay taxes and they love to do drugs. Just like that.
What's the matter with that?
Right? They're still just like that. So I think
do drugs, but
so
I do not want to pay taxes.
So I think for the liberty, like one of my goals, in fact, one of my political goals is to sort of reform the Libertarian Party. In fact, what I want to do is to really focus on libertarian politics, to make it like a real competitive political party to the same extent as, the Democratic and the Republican Party. Yes, I know that the Republican and the Democratic Party, they run also as corporations and they have a duopoly. It's really tough to step into. But we need to, again, I have to come back to the faction part. We need to put our differences aside, put those factions aside, and focus on building a strong coalition that will actually rival the other guys. So that is the thing. So I think like to run as a libertarian at the federal level, we need to clean the house first. But at the local level, I think it's, of course, running as a libertarian is the best bet.
Okay. I want to post this quote real quick from the other black guy who likes gun show. That's me, by the way. That was not.
Now I put my mic back over here. Then go ahead.
And I want everybody to look at this and replace the word prejudices with the what is that, a pronoun? Replace the word prejudices with I'm going to do a round robin, and I'm going to ask each one of you, which word would you use to replace prejudices in this quote? So we're going to start with the smartest guy in the room, me.
Oh, okay.
Hold on. Now, listen, ordinarily you and I would joke about, like who's really the smartest one. But do you really think of the four of us here right now? Look at the four. I want you to look at what I'm looking at. Do you?
I'm the ultimate confident individual, bro.
Are you still going that you're smarter than Germinal?
Confidence does not replace intelligence.
I jest. Germinal, you're quite the impressive individual, to say the least. But
thank you.
I want to replace the word prejudices with sensibilities. So I'm going to read this with my word, and I'm going to ask all you guys to read and expand on what you think. You can sway 1,000 men by appealing to their sensibilities quicker than you can convince one man by logic. And that's what I think the duopoly is, that they're appealing to the most basic and primitive of sensibilities to the American electorate, and it is producing garbage. And so I'll pass this off to Germinal. What would you use in as
I will replace prejudice with emotions, because there is one quote of Hitler. He said, the mass is feminine and stupid. Only emotions can keep them under control. And so when you're able to appeal to people's emotions, all of the grown people and stuff, it's done. Like logic is out of the way, and they don't think rationally anymore. So I would use emotions. I use the word emotion.
I replaced this real quick because I just wanted to make a point that one of our favorite fans here, our followers, Melissa Rohrbaugh, she's a wonderful human being. She's a saint, deserves her place in heaven, because what she's dealt with on this earth. But I want to thank you for that comment. We'll get back to this segment real quick. But go ahead, Tub.
He's referring to, that's my wife that he's talking about. More importantly, I thought I told her to never watch this show. I'm pretty sure I said that to her. Don't ever listen. I tried to tell her, listen, you're better than this. Don't get on the show with us. And so my answer to her is no, I do not need a hat, because if I get a hat and sunglasses, I'm just gonna look like you guys. And good Lord, who wants to do that? And more importantly,
what do you mean, you people?
Ordering them on Amazon.
If you want to stay corny, if you want to stay corny, stay corny. But please go ahead and replace the word prejudices in this quote and explain why.
Mr. Matthews, I would like to replace the word prejudices with egos.
Okay.
No.
Explain why.
Everybody likes themselves. And because everybody likes themselves, they'll listen. You start flattering them, start telling them what they want to hear.
Yeah.
You'll get them that way. So Mr. Matthews, I'm going with egos.
Yeah.
Awesome. Eric?
I would have said emotions. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna. That's not original, but that's what I had. And Germinal stole it. I agreed with the smartest guy in the room. So, hey, you know what they say, Germinal, and I feel bad for you. The quote: "If you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room." So
it's time to change your room. Like I say that all the time. If you always got to be the smartest guy in the room, it's time to change your room. Go into it, because you're never going to learn. If you're the smartest guy in the room, you're never going to learn anything. Go and be the dumb guy in the next room and get in there and learn things. Become the smartest guy in that room, and then leave that room.
There you go.
So I would have to stay in this room for quite some time, but not because of you, Mr. Matthews. If we could kick Germinal off, I like my odds all of a sudden.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to switch gears real quick because we got a little bit of time left, much time as we need for this segment. But we're 10 days into the current administration. They ran on economics, border security, and cultural issues. Now, of those, 2 of the 3 I think they have gone full force on, and that's the culture wars and the border. The third thing, there was an executive order talking about, I think it was an agency to look to see what they could do to reduce consumer prices or whatever. It didn't have the full force of the government behind it, but they have focused wholeheartedly on those cultural issues and the border security issues. Meanwhile, I just see, because be honest, I like to troll people on the whoever's in charge. Whoever's in charge, I like to troll them, whether it be Democrats or Republicans. Right now, I get a greater rise from Republicans than I do Democrats, because Democrats have a hard time rebutting the criticisms that I have from them. But it seems like my Republican American friends are taking it personal when I say, when are they going to focus on the economics that catapulted them into the White House and control of the Senate? What is your take on what's happened over the last 10 days as far as economically for the American people, and where do you see this going over the next 4 years?
Well, when it comes to the economic landscape over the last 10 days, Trump has been going full force on those tariffs, and I'm against tariffs. It's anti-free trade.
Yeah.
I'm a strong advocate of the market order. You don't create economic growth through tariffs. You don't create economic growth by increasing prices on your people. It doesn't make sense. People who support tariffs, they do so for political reasons. There is no good economic arguments for tariffs or for protectionism in general. So, yeah, Trump, I think even 2 hours ago, he passed the tariff. I think it's 25% on Canada and Mexico as well. And yeah, and again, I'm definitely against it. To me, tariffs don't make sense. I understand the political argument, but it's an economic issue, and you don't solve economic issues with political reasoning. It doesn't make sense. And that's what, unfortunately, Trump is doing. I agree with his deregulation and stuff like that. That makes sense. The more you deregulate the economy, the better it is for everyone. But I think he has to review his tariffs, because in the long run, it's not going to end well. It's not going to have a good outcome on especially on the people that it wants to help. Because if his job, we all complain that inflation under Biden was really bad. And that's true. Yes, prices increased under his leadership. But if you come and you implement tariffs, you're not reducing prices, you make it worse. So I don't know if that's the legacy he wants to leave. And I'm still really skeptical with Trump, because I don't think Trump believes in reducing government spending. And I have a big problem with that. And people are like, oh, well, and he wants to get rid of the income tax. That's fine, but he wants to replace it with tariffs. I'm like, why?
Right. Yeah.
Why don't you cut government, man? Why don't you slash those programs in the first place? If you cut government, if you cut government by half, if you get rid of those programs, then we don't have to print money. We don't have to spend more. People feel like the government for some reason has to spend somehow. I'm like, no, all government does is producing deficits, and deficit leads to the national debt, and the national debt is what increases the cost of living. It's not rocket science. It's obvious. It makes sense, and yet people support it. And I've not seen a Republican giving me a sound economic argument as to why we need tariffs, as to why we need to replace the income tax with tariffs. I'm like, sure, get rid of the income tax, but don't put tariffs. No. Just cut government.
Well, the logic behind that is because prior to 1913, that's how the American government primarily funded itself. It was through tariffs. And Americans kept all of their money, and so it kind of offset. We're not at that stage anymore, because America is so co-reliant on government for everything. And I believe this started off during 9/11, because 9/11, the government sold us, see, if you don't worship us, if you don't make us omnipotent and above you, this is what happens. People fly airplanes into buildings. And the American government propaganda went on this hero worshiping shit, whereas they made the government the only thing that's between you and anarchy, and they don't even use the term anarchy correctly, but they're saying they are the line between you and people that want to kill you. Those people don't want to. Those people don't even know who we are. All they know is American bombs and drones are flying over their countries, blowing up weddings, killing children, killing people's families. That's the only thing a lot of these so-called adversaries that America has, that's the only thing they truly know about America is destruction. So I just don't see how the current economic plan with the tariffs, I didn't know about the Americans have no idea that the tariffs on Canada and Mexico are going to reflect in your Walmart, in your grocery store, in your Target, wherever you want to shop. That's going to reflect upon you. But people want to make excuses as if tariffs are something. Mexico is like, hey, United States, we're going to cut you a check for $100 million for our tariffs for our product. That's not how it works. This is the ignorance of American people that don't understand the economics behind this, because I saw this video, it perfectly summed it up. If a guy buys $10 t-shirts from China, the United States says we're going to put $10 also on those t-shirts. So now it costs that guy $20 to buy that t-shirt. How much is he going to sell them for to you at your local store where you're going to buy a t-shirt for work? He's going to sell it to you for $30.
Yeah, maybe even 40, because he needs to at least break even or even make a profit.
Make a profit, right? And you're right. It's more likely to $40 for that T-shirt that should have cost him $10 and should have cost you $20 because the government. And this has been my theme tonight. And Tim says it may be lazy to think it, but I firmly believe the problem economically, socially, and whatever illy that you have, it ends up being government that is the ultimate evil.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Deceiver. Absolutely. The government is the ultimate deceiver, and you think you live free. Some guy said we live in the freest country in the world. I was like, what can you do without government permission? What can you do? You can't go to McDonald's without government permission, because they give you a little piece of plastic that expires. I know Tub likes to talk about things that expire, licenses and whatnot.
Yeah. Step back again. Let's keep talking.
No. But the economics of the situation with America is, that's what I wanted to. Where do you see this country in 3-4 years?
In 3-4 years, I see a lot of inequality. But again, I love inequality, man. It's good. I believe in wealth inequality. People will say, oh, it's bad. Like, the rich got richer. Yes, the rich will always get richer. Just learn finance, learn how to invest, and you will not be poor anymore. So it's going. We're gonna have more inequality because Trump is not pro-free market. That's the thing. If you keep increasing government spending, because during his first term, as I say, like, he added $7.25 trillion to the national debt, and now he's going to add more. I don't know how much he's going to add, but with the program he's going to create, like he says, he wants to create the ERS, that nonsense. I'm like, what are you doing, man? Okay, you want to abolish the IRS, fine, but you want to repeal the ERS. Why do you want to create another government program? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, every government program you create, again, right? It's the Federal Reserve printing money. It creates a constellation effect. Like, the rich will get richer, the poor will get poorer. So I think for people who have money tied to the investment, they're fine. That will never affect them. They're good. But it's the middle class that will take a toll, because they're the ones that relies on their savings. They want to buy a home, and the price of homes keeps increasing. The median price is what, like 460 something thousand. It's a matter of time before it goes to 500, maybe 600. Like it becomes unaffordable. And what makes life unaffordable is government. They keep printing money. So in the next 4 years, like if Trump was pro free market, the first thing he should do, in my opinion, is to stop spending, cut government programs, cut those government agencies. Like there's some agencies, they employ like 5,000 people for what? That's why I love Milei. Milei just say, get the fuck out of here. Like, go get a job in the private sector.
Yeah. Well,
I would just like to add that when he dropped the F-bomb, he lost his accent.
So one of my things with Doge is for me, the lowest hanging fruit that you could talk about cutting government is corporate subsidies and all these corporations that are getting all this welfare, the energy sector. Elon Musk is one of the greatest beneficiaries of corporate welfare.
As you say, like all the tech oligarchs, they all do.
Yeah, and the only thing they have been cutting, and rightfully so, there's a lot of government, no doubt. But if you're not going to look at the Pentagon first and the corporate welfare second, you're really not talking about cutting government spending or the efficiency of government, because those are the low-hanging fruit where you're paying $1,000 for a toilet seat on a military transport aircraft or $200 for a bag of bolts for the Air Force. If you're not talking about those things, if you're not addressing those things, are they really making any economic progress in reducing the size of government?
Right.
No.
No,
that was a question.
I can hear myself. But the thing is that, like, yes, you're absolutely correct. Like when it comes, for example, to corporate welfare, they have to start with that, because those are the ones who create monopolies. You know, people say,
right.
"Oh yeah, like we have monopolies in the United States." Like they even when we look at Big Pharma, for example, I was explaining to someone on Instagram that in a real free market system, you cannot have monopolies, because competition will enable people to reduce prices. Because we're talking about, the healthcare system. People say, oh yeah, like the American healthcare system is broken. And they love to use Europe as an example and Canada as an example of a successful healthcare system. I said, in the American healthcare system is not working because of government. Because government is giving subsidies to Big Pharma, which allows them to create a monopoly on the healthcare industry. Otherwise, if you let real raw capitalism play its role, I'm sure that those guys are going to reduce the price of the goods and services to people. It won't be that hard.
Yes, naturally when there's competition.
Exactly. But people don't get it. Like, government is the one creating this problem. And if we don't get rid of corporate welfare, if we don't address the issues that you actually talk about, it won't matter. And the things that I don't know if Trump is actually willing to cut those programs. That's much compared to Milei. Milei actually says, like, no, we get rid of it. And that's why people say, oh, he's far right. I'm like, it's not far right. The guy said, like, hey, like, if you want to do drugs, do drugs. Like, you select the gender you want. Like, it doesn't matter. All he cares about is cutting government spending, and it's working. Libertarianism is working, but Trump is not pro free market, in my opinion.
Hey, Germinal, if there was one book of yours that you could hand to Trump and know that he read it and he paid attention and it changed the way he governed, which of your books do you think you would hand to him?
I will definitely give him the 2-volume book that I wrote called A History of Wealth Distribution in the U.S.
History of Wealth Distribution in the U.S.
In the United States, yeah.
All right. I want to start a campaign to try to get this book in the hands of Trump. I'm calling you out, Angela McArdle. If you have his ear, we need you to get Germinal G. Van's History of Wealth Distribution.
Yeah, this is the first volume here.
History of Wealth Distribution in the United States. We need this in the hands. Now, I doubt Trump's reading that book. Look how many pages is in there.
Yeah, the first thing I thought, he's not reading
pictures.
All right, we're gonna need the History of Wealth Distribution in the United States for Dummies version, and we'll make sure we get that into the hands of Trump. But
I mean, the whole thing, it's a 2-volume book. The whole thing is like 814 pages.
Okay,
that's
not bad.
Oh, yeah,
that's less than Atlas Shrugged, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the first volume goes from 1760 to the Great Depression, and that's 400 and what? Hold on, let me see. Yeah. That's 470 something pages, and the second volume is like 360 something.
We need big font and wide margins for that. Right? That's what I can handle. 400 pages. That's what I'm in at that point right there. This is Eric. I appreciate the fact that you decided that you would like to one last time before we're done to prove that Germinal's that much smarter than us. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I love the fact that I'm like, yeah, he's got the book on his shelf, and it's two books.
2 hands.
Yeah, 2 volumes right there, guys.
Bigger than I've never read a book that big. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, and I've been reading this.
So you're reading that. Okay. You didn't write that one. You didn't write that one. You're reading it right now.
Yeah, I'm reading Mrs. Okay. But I wrote these 2. Those one I wrote them.
So Germinal, another question. Have you, French being your first language, have you published any books in French?
Yes, I did, and I would never do it again.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, like, is that the dominant language in the Ivory Coast?
Yeah, it's the first. Yeah, it's the main language there. Yeah.
Could you pay someone or hire someone for your publishing company that just like translates your, or maybe there's some AI might do that.
Yeah, I might do that.
Translate some of your published books into French and then start getting those disseminated.
People that they don't read, man. I can translate all the books I want. Those guys don't read.
Americans
What if you did like a Cliff Notes version? You know what I mean? Something I'd read. What if I took your book? Here's what I would do. I would say, hey, Chat GPT or whatever you choose to use. What's highlights of this book that I need to focus on, or chapters or whatever topics that are most important or relatable to life, blah, 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 that sort of thing. Like there's probably a way, like you've said, to use the internet and now AI to the advantage to make some smaller versions of your books that people could consume much easier, maybe.
I'm sorry, before you touch on this, but I want to say, Eric, that's a great idea. The problem with Americans and a lot of people around the world, they don't go past the headlines of a story before they form their opinion.
Yeah.
And you'll there was an experiment done where people just posted headlines, but the story was completely different and went straight to the comment sections, and people had an opinion that had nothing to do with the actual article. And that is what I have found myself, that people will simply form their opinions off 2 sentences. So even the Cliff Notes are, you have to get them with memes and things of that nature. Maybe Germinal could start becoming a meme maker. I think that would be quite effective in getting that across to a lot of people. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Germinal.
I don't even know what to say at this point.
Or, I mean, like, I would say an audio version of your books. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. Audio. Like, the thing is, like, back home, I don't even know if people have, like, I don't think people have Amazon there. Because Amazon is still not established in Africa, at least maybe in South Africa at best, but in most African countries there's no Amazon. So I don't know.
My wife went to Tanzania when she was in college, her undergrad, for 2 months, and it counted as electives, but it was more like just a cultural thing. But she lived in Dar es Salaam.
Yeah, Dar es Salaam.
she learned a little bit of Swahili, and she volunteered at orphanages and like their pharmacies. My wife's a pharmacist, but like their pharmacies is just like a phone booth on the side of the road, and they're selling, over the counter medication basically. But so, anyways, so I mean, like that was 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. It's probably 12 years ago at least. So I don't know if Tanzania's gotten any different, but she definitely had culture shock going from the United States.
Oh, I'm sure it got different, but the question is in what direction it got different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the world evolves regardless. It's the same like when people ask me, like, do you think Africa will develop? Absolutely. The question is by who? Is it going to be developed by Black Africans, or is it going to be developed by the Lebanese, the Chinese who are settling there?
Yeah. That's I think that's the second phase of colonialism, the Chinese government, because I think that's a rejection of Western culture and Western influence is letting these Chinese in Africa, and I think that's far worse.
Yeah, they give those predatory loans to African governments. I think they did that to Uganda, where they did the airport. Yeah, those guys.
Yeah, and currently China's building, because right now they have a if you know your military term, they have a brown water navy, meaning they're basically coastal, but currently they're building a blue water navy, but they're untested. So China's going to have to do something to see if their technology is on par with the United States. And there's a few countries I think they'll or areas they'll do that in. One is the South China Sea with the Philippines and Vietnam. The other area would be like the Gulf of Eden and around Western Africa, where they can see if they could use what do you call it, gunboat diplomacy, to have their influence on these developing nations, because that's where the future is. A lot of people, don't take this the wrong way, my white American friends, but Africa is the future. It has the resources the world needs to go where the world is going right now, and it's going to be very difficult to get to where we need to go without the natural resources of Africa. And China is making major inroads in East Africa, and they're moving to West Africa now. So, everybody can.
Well, what we need is someone to figure out the best country for us all to become libertarian expats in the continent of Africa. Pick the most classically liberal libertarian country, or one with the least authoritarian government that can allow a natural growth of libertarianism. And let's start the Free State Project Congo or whatever,
Not long as Ted doesn't go, I'm good with that. I don't want
Republic of Congo. How are things there? Things going good there? I don't know.
Bad there actually right now. There's a lot of exploitation going on in Congo. Hey, what do you think about Burkina Faso and the leader there?
Man, you're gonna make me start ranting, man. I hate those guys. I genuinely despise those men. No, seriously, because those guys took their people in hostages, like they hold their people hostages.
Yeah.
Because they create this nonsensical organization called the Alliance of Sahelian States. I'm like, what you guys have to get to move away from the ECOWAS? First of all, let us assume that they actually put the thing in motion, which they sort of did. You're gonna print money, worthless money. Your money is shit. No one trusts that money in the first place, right?
But aren't they doing it backed by gold?
What's that?
Aren't they doing it backed by gold?
Oh hell no! What gold? Oh hell no! Hell no! Absolutely not. It's paper money, man. Fractional reserve banking. They no, hell no. There's no gold. Those guys, those guys, they're gonna print money like Zimbabwe. No one trusts the currency. That's number one. Number two, they don't even produce their own electricity. Ivory Coast is the one feeding Burkina Faso and Mali in electricity, and Nigeria is feeding Niger or Niger. I don't know how you guys pronounce it. But
Yeah.
in
I'm not gonna say how I pronounce
You're not going there.
I'm not allowed to say that word.
Oh, you're not. Yeah, that's all.
but Nigeria is feeding Niger as well in electricity. So those guys are not independent at all. And on top of that, people from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, they all moving to the coastal states. So Nigeria, Togo, Benin, Ivory Coast, all these countries on the by the ocean. No one is going there. What opportunities you guys have to offer? You guys have nothing. Like, you are the definition of poverty. Like, I'm not even saying that to be mean, but you guys are broke. Like, why am I going to go there? I was talking to my mom about this. I was like, Mom, would you go to Burkina Faso for work? She's like, absolutely not. I'm like, so what are we talking about here? Those guys, they took power, they love it, and they don't want to leave. Because they knew that if they stayed in the ECOWAS would say, like, you need to transfer power to the civilians. They always do a coup, and then they say, it's to restore civilian order. And then they say, oh, we're here for 24 months. And it goes beyond the 24 months, and they don't know what to do. So they create all sort of shenanigans to stay in power. And that's why they create this nonsense. So those guys in power in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, honestly, those guys are just charlatans.
Okay, I want to apologize to Tub and Eric because they probably have no freaking clue.
Dude, I thought Burkina Faso was a guy's name. I didn't even know it was a country.
Yeah, he considered himself the next Thomas Sankara. I'm like, get the hell out of here.
Oh, okay, my last question before I wrap up: who has the best jollof rice in West Africa?
Personally, I don't really like jollof rice, but I would say Nigeria has the best jollof rice.
Okay.
Yeah, I had it before. It was good, although it's not my favorite. Dish.
Tub, if you guys have been to South Carolina,
is it like South or West Africa?
That red rice was brought to South Carolina by Africans. If you guys have ever had that red rice down in South Carolina, that's what we're talking about, jollof rice. I don't know if you guys are that sophisticated who have eaten in Charleston.
I'm slightly too black for that.
All right,
if I can avoid South Carolina, I try to.
Yeah, Charleston is beautiful. I love.
Yeah, I know. We've been to Charleston. It's a cool spot. Good seafood.
Indeed, that's what I loved about it. So as we wrap up here,
I want you to know it's time to shut this thing down. Do you understand where we started with Germinal, and now we're talking about seafood in Charleston? We're done.
And
we start out hitting economics, and we're busting things down, and all of a sudden we're like, yeah, but I really like the seafood in Charleston. We're done. We're shut this thing down. And then never do a podcast again.
That was
those were Tubbs' closing remarks. Great job, Tubbs.
Thanks for your closing remarks, Eric. Your closing remarks?
Yeah, I'll just say, Germinal, man, thanks for coming on. How can everyone find your books to purchase, to download on their Kindle if people still have those?
Yeah, absolutely. But honestly, guys, thanks for having me. I really appreciate coming on. It was a true pleasure talking to you guys. We talk about everything. It was fun. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. So back to it real quick. Back to Eric. Is there a way that people can follow you, reach you, or what's your social media, maybe website or whatever?
Yeah, so I'm the most active on Instagram, but I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn. And for anyone who wants to write a book, who has already written the manuscript, they can go on the GGV Publishing Company website, and then if the book is good, we can publish them. Yeah, we're always looking for libertarian authors. So what I want to say is that my publishing company is a safe space for libertarian authors. So yeah.
Sweet. GGV Publishing.
Yeah,
GGV Publishing Company.
All right,
so
cool.
Here at the Black Powder Podcast, we will always embrace safe spaces for libertarians, because we are the minority in this country that is abused and treated the worst. Libertarians in general. And dang it, I almost had an I had talking about abuse and whatnot, I was looking at Tubb's face and I was like, say so. I refuse. I want you to know, Tubb, I refrain from.
You telling us about it is.
I didn't tell you the gist of the subject matter, but I want to thank you so much because this has been one of the more enlightening episodes that we've had on here. We've had some awesome guests, you know, Justin Amos, Spike Cohen, all kinds of people, Mary J. Ruard, you know, every LP candidate that's come on that ran for president last year. We had them all on, Lars, Chase, Mike, you know, there was a whole bunch of mics that we had on here, but this has been one of the more intellectual and informative episodes that we have on here. So I want to thank you very much for coming on this evening. And, you know, upon your next book release, please reach out to us because we'd love to help you promote it and get it out there for the libertarians that follow us on multiple platforms that need to hear this message, because I think it's truly important. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. So as we get ready to close out, this has been the Black Powder Podcast, the only real libertarian podcast out there, with myself, the only real libertarian, Marcus Matthews. I want to thank my host, Tubb. Thank you very much, my good man. Eric Parker, thank you very much, homie. And Germinal, I look forward to following your career because I think you know, people throw around the term influencer and it's lost its value. Influencers like inflation and the Federal Reserve. People just print influencers every day, but you truly are a individual that is coming with a message to the people that eventually I think it will resonate with the masses, and you could be.
You missed the opportunity to say he's the gold standard in that analogy. Come on, man. Gold standard, inflation, printing influencers, Germinal G Van. You're the gold standard.
Only libertarian that's the gold standard is me, and I'm the libertarian king. Don't ever interrupt me again when I'm in my closing monologue, because I don't appreciate you understand. Wrap it up, B. But as we say on the Black Powder Podcast, in closing, as brothers in liberty, to all, I wish you to live free or die. Thank you for watching.